May 11, 1945, 0545 hours. Radar Picket Station 15, East China Sea, off Okinawa. A tense grey dawn broke over the USS Hugh W. Hadley, DD 774, illuminating the weary faces of her crew. For 18 grueling hours, the Allen M. Sumner-class destroyer had held this lonely, exposed station, a floating sentinel on the outermost perimeter of the American invasion fleet. From the bridge, Commander Baron J. Mullaney scanned the horizon, not with uncertainty, but with a grim anticipation of what the rising sun would inevitably bring. For 6 relentless weeks, the fleet had been subjected to a storm of steel and fire, a new and terrifying form of warfare for which no pre-war manual could have prepared them. The kamikaze, the divine wind, had torn through the most powerful navy in the world with a brutal and devastating effectiveness. Veteran ships that had survived years of brutal surface engagements and conventional air attacks in the Coral Sea, at Guadalcanal, and the Philippine Sea were now being shattered in a matter of minutes by a single pilot in a single aircraft. The official U.S. Navy damage control doctrine, a comprehensive set of procedures developed in the interwar years and refined in the early battles of the Pacific, was proving catastrophically inadequate. It was a system designed to counter the effects of torpedoes, artillery shells, and aerial bombs, weapons that, however powerful, followed predictable ballistic paths and were launched by an enemy who intended to survive. It had not, and could not, have anticipated an adversary who transformed his own aircraft, his own life, into a precisely guided, unstoppable missile. What the High Command at Pearl Harbor and in Washington, D.C. was only beginning to comprehend was that across the vast expanse of the Pacific Fleet, on the weather decks of destroyers, in the hangar bays of aircraft carriers, and deep within the engineering spaces of cruisers, a quiet revolution was underway. This was not a revolution dictated by Admiralty circulars, but one forged in the crucible of combat. Damage control teams and ship's crews, driven by the primal instinct for survival, were radically re-engineering their approach to saving their ships through field modifications, tactical improvisation, and a new philosophy of intensive, realistic training. These grassroots innovations, born from the ashes of burning ships and the loss of comrades, would ultimately save countless lives and preserve dozens of vessels essential to the final push against Japan. But on this morning, for the crew of the Hadley, these hard-won lessons were about to face their most severe trial by fire, the genesis of a desperate doctrine, the Philippine Inception. The kamikaze threat did not emerge from a long-standing military tradition, but from a moment of absolute desperation. In October 1944, as the American juggernaut descended upon the Philippine Islands, Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, commanding the Japanese First Air Fleet, faced a stark tactical reality. He possessed a mere 41 operational aircraft to oppose the largest naval armada ever assembled. Conventional aerial tactics had proven futile. His inexperienced pilots, with minimal training and flying increasingly obsolete aircraft, were systematically annihilated by battle-hardened American aviators flying superior Hellcats and Corsairs, their every move tracked by advanced radar systems. Faced with certain defeat, Onishi proposed a horrific, yet chillingly logical alternative on October 19th, the formation of special attack units. His premise was simple. If a poorly trained pilot could not deliver a bomb accurately with conventional methods, he would become the guidance system himself. The human brain and eye would provide terminal guidance, compensating for technological inferiority by ensuring the aircraft and its explosive payload would strike the target with direct, deliberate, and final control. The concept found an immediate and fervent advocate in Captain Motoharu Okamura, who had been agitating for such tactics since the previous June. He immediately volunteered to organize the first missions. The theory was tragically validated on October 25, 1944, off Samar Island during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. At 10:53 hours, a single Zero fighter, piloted by Lieutenant Yukio Seki, smashed through the flight deck of the escort carrier USS St. Lo, CVE-63. The aircraft's bomb detonated deep within the hangar bay amidst fully fueled and armed aircraft, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction of secondary explosions. The once proud carrier was engulfed in an inferno and sank within 30 minutes, taking 113 sailors with her. The brutal calculus was now clear to the Japanese high command. One pilot, one plane, could indeed equal one major warship destroyed. Within days, what had been a desperate, ad hoc measure was formalized into a widespread tactic, with kamikaze units organized throughout the Philippines. By November 1944, these suicide attacks had damaged or sunk over 30 American vessels, sending shockwaves through the fleet. A system broken. Why conventional defenses failed. The U.S. Navy's air defense network was a sophisticated, multi-layered system that had performed magnificently during the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, decimating Japanese naval air power in a conventional engagement. Yet this very system was fundamentally ill-suited to counter the kamikaze for several profound reasons. Traditional aerial assaults involved coordinated bomber formations approaching at high altitude. Radar could pick up these large formations from 75 miles away or more, providing ample time for combat air patrols, KP, to vector in and intercept. Anti-aircraft gunners then had the opportunity to engage multiple targets as they maneuvered for their bombing runs, and critically, if a plane was damaged, the pilot would often break off his attack to try to save his own life. The kamikaze shattered this paradigm. They approached not in large, detectable formations, but in small, scattered groups, or even alone, making them difficult to distinguish from ground clutter on radar screens. They flew at wave-top height, using the sea itself as cover, often remaining undetected until they popped up for their final dive in the last frantic seconds. Most terrifyingly, when anti-aircraft fire found its mark, it did not necessarily stop the attack. A kamikaze plane, even with a dead or dying pilot, or with a wing on fire, could remain on its lethal trajectory through sheer momentum. The kamikaze delivered a unique and concentrated form of destruction. It was not merely the explosion of its bomb, but the combined kinetic energy of an airframe weighing several tons impacting at 300 miles per hour, the conflagration of hundreds of gallons of volatile aviation fuel, and the detonation of the ordnance itself. This combination created simultaneous, widespread damage, massive fires, severe shock damage, and structural deformation that overwhelmed systems designed to contain isolated incidents. The official damage control doctrine, which emphasized compartmentalization through the dogging down of watertight doors, fighting fires with salt water from the ship's centralized fire main system, and shoring up damaged bulkheads, was simply not enough. A kamikaze impact would often sever the very fire mains the crews relied upon, instantly crippling their primary firefighting capability. It could jam critical hatches and doors with twisted metal, trapping sailors and isolating damage control parties. It sprayed burning gasoline across multiple decks and compartments, starting conflagrations that water could not easily extinguish. The fleet was learning, through brutal experience, that a new doctrine was needed, and it would have to be written not in a classroom, but on the decks of burning ships. The proving ground, USS Laffey and the power of preparedness. The destroyer USS Laffey, DD-724, would become the definitive case study in how transcendent leadership, exhaustive training, and tactical foresight could enable a ship to survive against seemingly impossible odds. Her commander, Commander Frederick Julian Beckton, was a man whose command philosophy was forged in the fire of previous losses. He had served aboard the first USS Laffey, DD-459, and witnessed her terrible sinking point blank in the naval Battle of Guadalcanal in November 1942. His subsequent command, the destroyer USS Aaron Ward, was sunk by Japanese dive bombers off Iron Bottom Sound in April 1943. Beckton had seen his ships die beneath him, and he understood with visceral clarity that survival in the face of Japan's new tactics depended on preparation that went far beyond the requirements of any official manual. From the moment Laffey was commissioned in February 1944, Beckton drilled his crew with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He conducted full ship damage control drills not monthly, but weekly, and sometimes multiple times in a single week. He systematically cross-trained sailors from every department, yeomen, radiomen, storekeepers, in basic firefighting and emergency repair procedures, ensuring that damage control parties could be reconstituted from any available hands after casualties were taken. He violated standard procedure by decentralizing damage control equipment. Instead of storing all gear in designated central lockers, he positioned firefighting equipment, battle lanterns, and emergency patches throughout the vessel, particularly in vulnerable areas like gun mounts and the superstructure. He had his engineers rig backup fire hoses that could be connected to alternative water sources, such as the diesel-driven fire and bilge pumps, ensuring the ship would not be rendered helpless if the primary fire main was severed. He prepositioned foam canisters and chemical extinguishers near gun positions and areas where aviation fuel or lubricating oil was likely to ignite. These were not minor adjustments. They were a fundamental reimagining of the ship's damage control organization, based on Beckton's tactical analysis of where kamikazes were most likely to strike and what systems would fail first. On April 16, 1945, all of this preparation faced its ultimate validation. Stationed at Radar Picket Station 1, the most dangerous and exposed post off Okinawa, Laffey was singled out for annihilation. Beginning at 0830 hours, the destroyer was subjected to an 80-minute nightmare, enduring 22 separate kamikaze attacks. 6 aircraft crashed directly into the ship. 4 bombs scored direct hits. The vessel was transformed into a floating hellscape, with fires raging in 5 separate locations simultaneously. The forward fire main was completely severed. The after-engine room flooded uncontrollably. Steering control was lost. Yet Laffey did not die. Beckton's preparations paid dividends at every turn. When the main fire system failed, crews seamlessly switched to the backup hoses they had drilled with countless times. When gasoline fires erupted on the decks, foam was immediately available to smother them because it had been pre-positioned based on Beckton's foresight. When flames licked dangerously close to the forward magazine, crews executed pre-planned procedures to flood it using alternate pumping arrangements. Jury-rigged steel plating, welded around critical fuel and hydraulic lines, contained fires and shrapnel just long enough for repair parties to move in and extinguish them. By 1,000 hours, though grievously wounded, with 32 of her crew dead and 71 wounded, USS Laffey remained not only afloat, but operationally viable. She had absorbed a level of punishment that should have consigned any destroyer to the depths, and she had survived through a culture of preparedness instilled by her commanding officer. Fleet-wide adaptation, the grassroots revolution. The success of ships like Laffey was not an isolated phenomenon. A pattern of grassroots innovation was emerging across the entire Pacific Fleet, as sailors and officers on the front lines adapted to the unprecedented threat. The attack on the aircraft carrier USS Franklin, CV-13, on March 19, 1945, provided another brutal lesson. Hit by 2 armor-piercing bombs that ignited fueled and armed aircraft on her hangar deck, Franklin suffered one of the most severe fires ever survived by an American warship. Her war damage report, a monumental study by the Bureau of Ships, documented how standard procedures failed and how crew improvisation saved the ship. Sailors formed ad hoc fire parties, dragging hoses through shattered, burning compartments. A single diesel-powered emergency fire pump, started manually after all electrical power was lost, provided the crucial water pressure that prevented a total loss. The cruiser USS Santa Fe, CL-60, performed a daring alongside maneuver, a controlled collision, to provide firefighting support and evacuate casualties. The techniques Franklin's crew developed during 10 hours of hellish firefighting became foundational case studies in post-war damage control schools, directly influencing official recommendations for decentralized hoses, portable pumps, and improved foam systems. On the destroyers assigned to the deadly radar picket line, crews took matters into their own hands. Officially, any structural modification affecting a ship's weight or stability required extensive review and approval from the Bureau of Ships. Facing daily annihilation, the picket destroyers ignored the bureaucracy. Using scrap steel salvaged from damaged vessels or obtained from tender workshops, they welded makeshift armor plates around exposed gun mounts, bridge wings, and ammunition handling rooms. These field modifications were crude and unauthorized, but they worked, absorbing shrapnel and fragments from near misses and allowing gun crews to remain at their stations longer during sustained attacks. At the vast advanced repair base at Ulithi Atoll, the paradigm shifted from perfection to pragmatism. Navy construction battalions, Seabees, and civilian shipfitters developed rapid repair techniques that defied official procedure. Standard practice demanded that damaged hull sections be meticulously cut away and replaced with new, precisely fabricated steel, a process that could take months. At Ulithi, the Seabees would cut patches from the wreckage of other ships, shape them roughly with cutting torches and sledgehammers, and weld them into place. These expedient repairs were not pretty, but they were strong, they were watertight, and they returned critically needed ships to the front lines in days or weeks, not months. This fleet-wide revolution shared common, defining characteristics. The innovations were conceived and implemented by the men who directly faced the threat. They often involved bypassing or outright violating official protocols. And most importantly, they were proven to work under the most demanding conditions imaginable. By the time the campaign reached its peak in late May and June of 1945, new ships arriving on the line often incorporated these battle-proven modifications before even seeing combat, and damage control training had been radically overhauled to reflect the hard-won lessons from ships like Laffey and Franklin. The ultimate test, USS Hugh W. Hadley at the climax. The experience of the USS Hugh W. Hadley on May 11, 1945, served as the ultimate demonstration of both the power of this new preparedness and the terrifying limits of any defense against a saturated, determined attack. Commander Mullaney, a disciple of the new philosophy, had trained his crew to a razor's edge. For 95 minutes that morning, Hadley and her companion, the destroyer USS Evans, fought off one of the war's most concentrated kamikaze assaults. Hadley's gunners, exhibiting phenomenal discipline and skill, shot down 23 enemy aircraft, a record for a single engagement that stands to this day. Her fighter direction team expertly vectored combat air patrols to intercept and destroy many more. The crew's training and the tactical modifications to their ship allowed them to maintain a high rate of fire and effective damage control readiness throughout the onslaught. Yet the sheer number of attackers was overwhelming. Despite their heroic defense, 4 kamikaze aircraft and 1 conventional bomb, likely from a Barker bomb, a rocket-powered suicide aircraft, struck the Hadley. The impacts were catastrophic, killing 30 sailors and wounding 67 others. Fires swept through the ship, engineering spaces flooded, and her stern settled dangerously low in the water. Facing the real possibility of a catastrophic breakup or magazine explosion, Commander Mullaney made the difficult decision to order the majority of the crew, all but a core 50-man damage control party, to abandon ship and take to life rafts. The remaining sailors, the specialists trained for this exact moment, waged a desperate battle to save their ship, isolating flooding by dogging down every accessible watertight hatch, fighting fires with portable pumps after the mains failed, and manually shoring up weakened bulkheads. They performed miracles of endurance and skill. Their efforts maintained just enough buoyancy and stability for rescue tugs to arrive and take the shattered destroyer in tow. USS Hugh W. Hadley survived, but her fighting days were over. She was too badly damaged for economical repair, and she was ultimately decommissioned and scrapped. But her survival, even in this crippled state, was a testament to the principle that even in the face of tactical defeat, well-executed damage control could snatch a strategic victory from the jaws of total loss, preserving the most valuable asset of all, the lives of the crew. Legacy and statistical validation, the permanent transformation. The innovations born from the Kamikaze campaign did not end with the war. They were codified into the permanent DNA of the U.S. Navy. The principle that equipment must be positioned based on tactical vulnerability, not administrative convenience, became standard doctrine. Redundant systems, pre-positioned foam, supplementary armor, and intensive, realistic cross-training became the hallmarks of modern naval damage control. A comprehensive Bureau of Ships statistical analysis, reviewing the data decades later in 1998, confirmed the lessons of 1945. The study of 212 ships hit by kamikazes at Okinawa, 36 sunk, 176 survived, revealed that the surviving ships shared key traits. They had, on average, twice as many personnel assigned to damage control duties, they conducted drills 3 times more frequently, and they had implemented unauthorized field modifications at twice the rate of the ships that were lost. The Navy's transformation was a masterclass in institutional learning under extreme pressure. It demonstrated that a successful military organization must empower those closest to the fight to develop and implement solutions, trusting in the initiative and ingenuity of its people. Commander Beckton, who retired as a rear admiral, always maintained that Laffey's survival was a direct result of crew training that exceeded official requirements. His philosophy, and that of countless other commanders and crews, became a core tenet of naval operations. The legacy of the sailors who faced the kamikaze storm is not merely a collection of technical manuals or improved equipment. It is a living spirit of practical adaptation, of refusing to accept that doctrine is infallible, and of understanding that victory often depends on the ability of ordinary individuals to think, to adapt, and to act with courage and competence when circumstances demand it. They proved that wars are won not by technology or resources alone, but by the relentless will, preparation, and ingenuity of the human spirit. The fleet survived the kamikaze because American sailors, from commanders to deckhands, combined their technical skill with tactical flexibility, because they prepared beyond the minimum, and because they had the courage to do what was necessary rather than merely what was authorized. This remains their most profound and enduring lesson.